Ladies and gentlemen, we have a stolen road poneglyph. The prime suspect, this mysterious man marked by flames. Which means that we simply must figure out who this man is because he holds the final road poneglyph that is absolutely required for Luffy to find the One Piece. And so today I want to break down all the evidence we have and the many suspects to determine once and for all who is this mysterious man marked by flames. And now let me just put on my little detective hat here. Good. Alright, Jolio. Let's go solving that case, because every good detective always starts with the facts. So here is what we know so far. Fact number 1, the missing road poneglyph was on Fishman Island during the final voyage to reach Laugh Tale 26 years ago. But also, as we see in Luffy's journey down to Fishman Island, the red road poneglyph is now missing with only the regular poneglyph remaining. So whoever this man marked by flames is must have stolen it sometime during the last 25 years or so, which is actually very important because it already eliminates one major suspect, as we'll see in just a moment here. But that is of course not all the evidence we have. Far from it, in fact. And so just to quickly summarize the facts, we do know that there are many confirmed rumors of the man marked by flames, and we do know that he 1 supposedly sails on a black ship, and 2 that he might have some sort of control over whirlpools. Now again, this is not all. There are actually a ton of other facts that we can get into, but I just can't wait any longer to get to our first main suspect here. And so I want to start with the most obvious piece of evidence. It's already in the name. The man marked by flames. Let me say it again. Marked by flames. Seems like a oddly super specific description for a person, right? But does that literally mean that they have flames on them? Or is it more like a burn-shaped scar? A tattoo? Or is it more symbolic, such as somebody chosen by the flames or by the fire? And of course, it's questions just like this that really get my detective brain churning. So let's just cast a wide net for now and ask, who exactly do we know in the story that fits this title and all the other evidence that we've laid out so far? Well, let's look at our cool board here, because our first suspect is actually none other than Monkey D. Dragon. And I'm not gonna lie, I was almost ready to just straight up say that Dragon is the man marked by flames. I mean, for one, he does have a tattoo on his face that honestly doesn't really look like flames, but if you wanted to stretch it a little bit, I could see how that could actually work. But even more fitting actually is that Dragon fits 2 other pieces of evidence that describe the man marked by flames as well. Evidence number 1, he does sail in a black ship named the Wind Grandma, which is just an hilarious name for a ship. I love that fact about One Piece. Plus, the man marked by flames can supposedly create whirlpools to take out ships that get too close to him. And even though we don't know much about this man, if there is anything we know about Dragon's very suspicious powers, you should know that he is somehow strangely connected to the wind. And so if he does have some sort of wind devil fruit power, then he could potentially use these to create literal whirlpools. So I hope you can see that there's already a lot of evidence here pointing to Mr. Dragon being our prime suspect, but we are missing the single most important part of any criminal investigation out there: a motive. Why would Dragon, out of all people, want that poneglyph? Because let's be real, he has never shown any interest in the ancient history of the Void Century, besides being inspired to fight the world government after the destruction of Ohara. Plus, if he did have that road poneglyph, wouldn't he at least have mentioned it to the Straw Hats archaeologist Nico Robin when she spent 2 years training with them? Unless, I guess, she just didn't tell Luffy about it, but I kind of feel like she would have said something once they started looking for the road poneglyph specifically, if that was the case, right? Also, on top of that, the Revolutionary Army's original base got completely wiped out by the Blackbeard pirates, so if they did indeed have a poneglyph there, it probably would have already been in the hands of the Blackbeard pirates, right? Unless, of course, they somehow moved this super heavy stone in a short period of time, which just seems a little bit unlikely to me, but then again, it could explain why Blackbeard has been so interested in the Revolutionary Army as well. So, even though there is already a ton of evidence to support Dragon being the man marked by flames, in the end, he just doesn't really have the motive or just the completely right circumstances to be our prime suspect. So bam, not the man marked by flames, probably. Which now brings us right to our second suspect, who has one major reason for being a potential prime candidate. I'm talking about the man literally called the Flame Emperor and Dragon's right-hand man himself, Sabo. Let's just call it what it is. Sabo is quite literally a flame man, plus he has a scar on his left eye from when he was nearly blown up as a child by fire as well. So, flames? Check. Scar? Check. Are you convinced yet? Well, I'm actually not, because if you spent any time looking into the man marked by flames, you should know that Sabo actually makes no sense at all here. First off, he only acquired his Fire Devil fruit like a few months ago in the One Piece timeline, so there's just no way he would actually fit the rumors that Blackbeard had already heard over a year ago. Plus, he has absolutely no connection whatsoever to the poneglyphs, and as far as we know, has never been to Fishman Island either. So yeah, sorry Sabo fans if you exist. I think he is not the man marked by flames either. Okay, but at this point, with these two very often cited suspects out of the way, there aren't that many other obvious candidates that could be the man marked by flames. So let's dig a little bit deeper into a few more facts that I have already touched upon briefly, but that are actually very important. Because in chapter 1080, Blackbeard's crew are discussing the man marked by flames specifically, and keep in mind here that these are rumors, so not the most credible evidence to go by any means, but we were told that the man marked by flames sails on a black ship and can apparently also create these whirlpools to sink any ship that tries to come near him. And so I now want to dive a little bit deeper into that detail, because honestly, if you tell me that this person sails around and sinks ship on the ocean, my detective senses here are starting to blast that our mystery man is most likely a pirate. Yeah, which admittedly doesn't exactly narrow down the candidates in the One Piece world as a whole, but there is one particular group of pirates who are incredibly suspicious and have been working behind the scenes now for years. Do you know who I'm talking about? Well, it's of course the Ohara Patreon supporters, and you too can join this very exclusive club of awesome fans who help us create this amazing content on the channel and allow us to, you know, have custom art and editors and everything that we need here. But in all seriousness though, I have got my eyes trained directly on the most fearsome group of pirates in the history of One Piece, the Rocks crew. And I mean, come on, you knew that they were going to be in this video, because out of any pirate crew in history, the Rocks pirates were probably the closest to actually overthrowing the world governments. It's also basically confirmed that their leader Rocks was interested in the forbidden history of the Void Century, because pirates like Big Mom and Kaido very likely learned about the poneglyphs from their time on this notorious crew, right? Plus, remember that those two former emperors here both even had their own road poneglyphs too, so it does make a lot of sense to me that the entire crew there would know a lot about all of these legendary stones. And while admittedly a lot of the former Rocks pirates are now dead, there are actually still three, yes, count them all, three, of these devious criminals who could still be reasonably our man marked by flames. And I want to start here with the baddest of them all, Wang Zi, also known as Ochoku, who pretty much until the time skip was just hanging out as the ruler of Pirate Island, though he was then eventually kicked out during the Rocky Port incident involving Blackbeard, Law, and the Marine Kobe. Now what's even more interesting though is that we recently learned that Law was hunting a poneglyph on Pirate Island as well, so just keep that fact in mind here. We have both Law and Blackbeard involved here, plus a possible poneglyph that was in Ochoku's possession. Okay, so let's use our detective brains here to actually analyze this information, because there are some connections here that you might have never realized, and I only realized researching this video. First, we already know that both Blackbeard and Law knew about the man marked by flames. Already pretty interesting. Secondly, they were both at the Rocky Port incident, so logically both Law and Blackbeard may have learned about the man marked by flames during that Rocky Port incident, which then leads us back to Ochoku here. Are you following what I'm getting at so far? Not going down too far the rabbit hole yet, I think. Well, just you wait, because it's about to get even crazier. Because next, please consider what happened with Law right after Wano. Because first, we got this super suspicious panel of Law, which to me just kind of screams that he's trying to hide that he both knows about the man marked by flames and that he's planning to go there once he leaves Wano. know, right? Let me know if you see that in that panel as well. So logically, I think we must now ask ourselves, well, where did Law actually go? And it just so happens that he very specifically picked this northeast island right here, which happens to be called Winter Islands. So did Law know that the man marked by flames was on Winter Island? Was that the reason he picked that direction? Well, we of course don't know that for sure, but you could certainly believe that based on what we've deducted so far. Plus, Winter Island is very close to Pirate Island, so it does make a lot of sense as a possible destination for Ochoku after he was kicked out by Blackbeard. So just another little hint pointing in the direction of Ochoku, though, if I'm being completely honest here, there is also some real evidence against this idea. For example, how would Ochoku have taken the road poneglyph off of Pirate Island if he was being attacked by Blackbeard, Law, and Kobe? Plus, of course, it also seems kind of unlikely to me that no one would have found him if he's indeed that close to Wano and Pirate Island, right? So all in all, I'm still not entirely convinced that Ochoku might actually be the man marked by flames here. But luckily, he is not the only former Rocks pirate on our suspect list either, because the other man that I've got my eyes on now is none other than Silveraxe. Now, we know almost nothing about Silveraxe beside the fact that he was a member of the Rocks Pirates and that it is possible that he is this mysterious figure right here. In fact, I bet some of you even forgot that he exists in the story at all. And the only reason we have to suspect him as well is that we don't know what he has been up to all this time ever since the Rocks Pirates broke up. Because think about it, we do know about basically every other crew member, but Silveraxe is suspiciously always missing, so we can't exactly rule him out unless he is one of these zombies here like Captain John. So I guess for now, based on this lack of evidence, we're gonna have to put him as a maybe as the man marked by flames, which now brings us to the third candidate from the Rocks Pirates, the Golden Lion Shiki. And let me tell you, Shiki does make sense as a suspect mostly because of his devil fruit powers. Now, in case you don't know, in the One Piece movie Strong World, Shiki was revealed to have the float fruit, which actually allows him to make anything float. Anything, which would be absolutely perfect for easily moving around a gigantic heavy block like a road poneglyph. However, unlike Silveraxe, we do actually know what he's been up to, at least based on that movie, and I'm pretty certain that he hasn't been out and about stealing poneglyphs. And though he has been marked by a helm, he has not really been marked by flames, I guess. And so looking at this list right now, with Dragon and Ochoku being the two best suspects we have, basically we're out of suspects again here based on the evidence we've presented so far. However, next, it's now also time to really put on our detective boots to look into the root of this missing road poneglyph. Let's break it down like this. We do know that the poneglyph used to be on Fishman Island. We do know that at some point it was moved, but what if it wasn't actually stolen? What if instead it was actually moved for safekeeping? Because I want you to keep in mind that Fishman Island was actually Whitebeard's territory until his death during Marineford, so if anyone was most likely to move the road poneglyph, it would have been him or someone from his crew. And so if we're thinking along those lines, one place it would make sense to move the poneglyph to is to a highly guarded island that would also be safe from other pirates and the world government. And I would argue that no island makes more sense in this situation than the legendary land of the giants, aka Elbaf. And honestly, this has of course been speculated to be the most likely place for the poneglyph to be all along anyways, even if for different reasons, and there's actually even more evidence to back up this idea as well. Number one, we all know that Shanks is now hunting the poneglyphs to find the One Piece, and he just recently visited Elbaf as well. So it would make a lot of sense, I think, that he came here because he knew there was a road poneglyph hidden as well. And this might especially be true because after absolutely destroying Captain Kid, he specifically took the defeated captain's poneglyph copies as well. Number two, in chapter 1124, we do see this strange character who seems to be waiting specifically for the Straw Hats on Elbaf, and while we don't know for sure yet, there is a lot of speculation that this mysterious man could be the man marked by flames. So let's assume for a second that our mysterious figure is here on Elbaf, who could it possibly be? Well, let's eliminate one suspect right off the bat because the cursed Prince Loki was once considered a prime candidate as the man marked by flames, but this has basically been completely debunked because he's been tied up for pretty much the last 6 years in the story. On top of that, we also don't have any evidence at all that Loki has even ever left Elbaf, so I'd say that he's a pretty easy not the man marked by flames. Okay, but no more messing around now. Let's actually get to the bottom of this mystery because next is a character we've been waiting to see forever to see him reintroduced to the story, because the next suspect is none other than my man, my boy, Scopper Gaban, the former third in command of the Roger Pirates and just the coolest dude out there. And like some of the other suspects, Gaban is here because we fully expect him to just show up at some point in the story again, and there is no better place than at the end of the journey to collect the final road poneglyph, right? If you've seen any of my other videos, you will know that I'm gonna sound like a broken record here, but I strongly believe it's very suspicious that a lot of former Roger Pirates have been suspiciously helping the Straw Hats all throughout their journey in the Grand Line, from this old man Crocus right here at the start, to Rayleigh right in the middle of the Grand Line, and of course Shanks. So it does make sense that Scopper Gaban, the third in command, will be waiting for them towards the end of the Grand Line. But that's not even the only piece of evidence, of course, because remember this mysterious figure we pointed out from chapter 1124? They're apparently waiting for the Straw Hats on Elbaf, but what's even crazier is that it looks very, very, very suspiciously similar to this figure from the cover story in chapter 631. And so if this person has a connection with Crocus, then that is even more evidence that this person is actually Scopper Gaban, because they're former crewmates. So altogether, it does make a lot of sense to me that they could have obtained the final road poneglyph and are now protecting it while waiting for the right person to pick it up. So I'm happy to say that Scopper Gaban here is going to get a solid, might be the man marked by flames, but even Scopper Gaban is not as great a suspect as this next character, because let me be honest, I was excited to find out that they almost perfectly fit every single piece of evidence and every criteria that we've laid out so far. And that person is none other than the former Marine and current scholar, Jaguar D. Saul. Because just listen to this. Okay, he must surely have some sort of ice burn scars from when he was literally frozen by the former Admiral Aokiji. We even see him here in this panel with bandages all over his body, and on top of that, he has a very obvious interest in the poneglyphs from his connection with the scholars of Ohara, and he would have had plenty of time by now in the past 25 years to have that poneglyph moved as well. Next, there's the fact that he is a giant and is currently also an Elbaf, so it pretty much all lines up perfectly for Saul. So I think we can pretty much say for certain that Saul is... actually, hold on for a second. Okay, there's one little detail that throws all of this off the boat, because as far as we know, Saul is not a pirate at this time. I mean, we certainly haven't heard anything about him sailing around in a black ship. Seems that he's just been in Elbaf, protecting the knowledge of Ohara, right? So I guess he doesn't exactly fit all the evidence, but I'll still go on ahead and say that he's most likely the man marked by flames. Unless, of course, Oda decides to introduce just an entirely new character who ends up being the man marked by flames altogether, which is always entirely possible, and we'd have no way to predict who that is. But if I had to put my detective hat on one of the options here, oh my god. I would say it would probably be someone who has been introduced in the story before, but honestly, I personally can't wait to see what kind of devil fruit power they have. I mean, black ships, whirlpools, it just all kind of sounds way too cool that I would guess it might just be another mythical zone fruit, but will it be ever as possible as the other mythical zones we've seen, like Kaido's dragon fruit, or Sengoku's Buddha fruit, or of course, Luffy's broken fruit? We'll have to wait and see, but if you want to know what the absolute best of these beastly devil fruits is, you can check out my video of the best zone devil fruit right here. And as always, thanks so much for watching, and thanks of course as always to my wonderful Patreon supporters that you can see right here. But whether you support the channel through Patreon or just by watching and engaging, I really appreciate all of you wonderful people, and I will see you in the next one.